وسهلا بكل الذين ينضموا للاستماع إلى راديو بلدي، أول راديو عربي أمريكي ويعنى بقضايا العرب في المهجر. برامجنا في راديو بلدي كل يوم جمعة من 8 وحتى 9 صباحا مع ليلى الحسيني في بث حي ومباشر وعبر WNZK راديو 690 AM. صباح الخير بلدي، صباح الخير لكل مستمعينا.
Welcome to Radio Baladi, the first Arab, Middle Eastern, and American simulcast radio show. Radio Baladi is broadcast every Friday morning on WNZK 690 AM from 8 until 9 Eastern Time on Good Morning Michigan with Layla Al-Husseini. Our call-in number 248-557-3300. And now, stay tuned for the best radio talk show on Arab and American issues with your host, Layla Al-Husseini.
This is Dr. Sahar Kamiz. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arab, WNZK 690 AM and WZMZ 700 AM. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Kamiz, Assistant Professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Maryland, College Park, and an expert on Arab and Muslim media. Our topic today is a very important and timely one. It is the Egyptian elections, challenges, prospects, and implications. After a historic revolution which stunned the world in 2011, the overthrow of President Mohamed Morsi in 2013 polarized and divided the Egyptian people, as some of them labeled it as a coup and strongly opposed it, while others saw it as a much-needed popular uprising and welcomed it. Today, Egypt is getting ready for a highly controversial presidential election, which more than ever before raises many questions about this strategically significant country's future, stability, and unity. Many questions could be asked today and are seeking an answer, such as what kinds of challenges face Egypt and the Egyptian people today as they approach this highly controversial round of presidential elections? What possible implications could these elections have in terms of this country's future and its social cohesion? What are the chances for reuniting the Egyptian people and reviving the spirit of national reconciliation and positive dialogue? What role can both mainstream and social media play in this regard, if any? With me this morning discussing this important topic are two highly qualified experts and media professionals, Dr. Atif Abdelgawad and Mr. Ali Younes. Both of them are experts and political analysts. Mr. Ali Younes, of course, has been a published and well-known broadcaster, working with many different radio stations and television stations and appearing on many different broadcasts internationally, and also a political analyst for the State Department. And Dr. Atif Abdelgawad is a well-known media person with a long history of experience with many different broadcasting stations, including BBC, and also a valued colleague with US Arab Radio. Good morning and welcome to the show, everybody. And I will start with Mr. Ali Younes. I would like to know from you, what is your own personal analysis of the ongoing challenges in the Egyptian political scene today?
Well, good morning, Dr. Sahar. Thank you very much for having me, and certainly I am glad to be back on air here on Radio Baladi, and I've hosted the show many times, and I'm looking forward to host it again in the Fridays to come. To be quite honest with you, as far as Egyptian elections, it's about time that Egypt has an election because, as you have mentioned rightly so, in the beginning, there were so many upheavals. After the deposing of former President Morsi, many of his supporters believe that he is still a legitimate president, whereas many people think it was a revolution and he was deposed by the military backed by the people of Egypt. Nevertheless, the past is the past. The Egyptians are looking forward to have a new election and elect a new president. I think the challenges that Egypt facing is huge, and I think it's not just electing a president that will solve all the Egyptian problems. I think electing a president is one of the big hurdles that face in Egypt. Mainly is the economy. The Egyptian economy is so weak and so tattered because after 30 years of Mubarak and 1 year of Morsi and Mr. Sisi, who probably will win the election, I don't think that electing a president will solve the problems, but it will pave the way to have an economic and political reform. Hopefully, that's what the Egyptians are looking for, but I'm hoping that that's what the new president will do. If he does that or doesn't, that's another question. But I am thinking that the Egyptian people are looking for a president who will solve their problems. But, personally, I don't think a military man, this is my convictions, that I am thinking the military man is not the right man for Egypt. But that's my personal opinion, because the military people are not prone to democracy and to have a second opinion, or they want to rule through democratic means like we have here in the United States. So that's my take on that. It's the economy. The new president has many challenges as far as, restoring the confidence of the Egyptian people. And, to be quite honest with you, Egypt has so many problems, economic, social, and political, that any person who will become a president, it will find it quite impossible to solve these problems in 4 or 8 years.
The whole theme or the whole notion of democratization and whether Egypt and the Egyptian people are ready for democracy or not has been a very big debate, which has been going on with many different views being voiced on both sides. Those who are saying, yes, we are optimistic. Egyptian people were able to overthrow Mubarak after 30 years of dictatorship and tyranny, and if they're able to do so, then definitely they can march forward towards a full-fledged democracy. And there are other voices on the other side who are much more skeptical and much more pessimistic, saying that no, the mood now, the general atmosphere in the country is not ready or prepared for democracy, and we still have a long way to go before we can have a full-fledged democracy installed in Egypt. What is your take on this?
Well, I personally have a problem with the notion that the Egyptians are not ready for democracy, as if the Egyptian people or the Arab people are some sort of minors or underage people, that they're not ready. They need to grow up. They need to be more mature. If Latin America can become a democracy and they have dictatorship, just, Augusto Pinochet in Chile, the Sandinistas in Nicaragua, the military, they had a coup in Bolivia, Venezuela. These people suffered from dictatorships, yet they were able to succeed and have a democracy. Although it was chaotic. Poland, all the communist bloc, they lived under communist dictatorship for decades, for 50 or 60 years, yet now they embrace democracy. Even Russia has some sort of a democracy. Yet, Arab regime, some of the Arab media says Egyptians are not ready for democracy. I think, any sane man in this day and age, they want to live under a rule of law and under a democratic regime. I think the problem is what we're facing today is that we have a huge lot of Egyptian media or Arab media who spread the notion that Egyptians are not ready for democracy, yet as if, after deposing the monarchy since the 1950s, when Gamal Abdel Nasser took over in power as a military man, and then we have Sadat, military man, Mubarak, a military man. Yet the only democratic president Egyptian had was President Mohamed Morsi, regardless of what you think whether Muslim Brotherhood, are good or bad. But he was the only democratic elected president. Now, we are seeing a return, the strong military man to rule Egypt, and with that, the notion that Egyptians are not ready for democracy. When will they be ready? In 100 years? This notion, ready or not ready, is quite absurd in my opinion. And I think Egyptians have the right to choose what kind of government they would like to be governed with, what kind of a president they want, what kind of democracy. It doesn't have to be a perfect democracy. It doesn't have to be American democracy, a British democracy, or a Swedish democracy, but some sort of accountability by the government, that the government or the president cannot do whatever he wants, cannot declare war or declare peace or, control Egyptian lives, without questioning, him or her if the Egyptian people elected a female president, in the future. So this is what I think, what we face today in the Arab world, coupled with the media that, look, in America, you can't have a democracy without a freedom of press. In Egypt, there is no real freedom of press. There's a media that are sponsored by Arab governments who are not interested in democracy. They're sponsored by the some Egyptian well-oiled money machines. That they're not interested in a democracy that is, you could elect you could elect a Christian, you could elect a Muslim, you could elect a male or a female. There are a lot of, power centers in Egypt and in the Arab world who are not interested in this kind of a democracy the way the Egyptian people want it, or the way I want it, or you want it.
Absolutely, and also I agree with you on this particular point because there was a lot of political expression even before 1952. Before we had the military rule in 1952, Egyptians used to go out and protest and have a say and to play a role in the political scene in the country, and they were very politically active and dynamic before we had the long many years of military rule, which makes very many people, kind of skeptical about the future ahead. When they're looking at this round of elections, they're looking at it with some kind of fear, with some kind of skepticism. They have many questions in their head, and they have so many uncertainties, I might say, or unclear vision about what comes ahead. And this affects their willingness or unwillingness to take part in this particular round of elections. Would you like to comment on this?
Yes. I think, look, if I was an Egyptian, I live in Egypt, I would have a huge, skepticism about General Sisi. First of all, I don't think this is my take, personal take, and nobody has to agree with me. I don't think he's a democratic man. The guy swore to uphold the Constitution of Egypt when he swore before President Morsi. Yet he violated his oath in office to uphold the Constitution, and he abolished the Constitution, and he deposed the president he swore allegiance to. This is not a small thing, but that tells you what kind of a man who will be the next president of Egypt. And on top of all that, there are scores of Egyptians are in jail, whether the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, agree or disagree with. Do they have the right to participate in the political process, in the political life of Egypt? I just came from Bahrain. I was invited there to cover a conference, and I met with Sheikh Al-Azhar. This is the highest religious authority in the Muslim world, Sunni world at least. And I met also with the Egyptian Minister of Religious Affairs, and they both told me that the Muslim Brotherhood rule was worse than Mubarak. Okay, Egypt had, the Muslim Brotherhood were the worst dictators Egypt have ever seen. Now, you could see the polarization that against the Muslim Brotherhood, against other parties. Now, granted, the Muslim Brotherhood were not the smartest to rule Egypt, but certainly they were not the worst to rule, Egypt. They did not stay in power for 30 years. But now, I say that as an example of what kind of problems Egypt is facing is not that electing a General Sisi, who almost will be elected. And I don't think, if you look at the Egyptian political elections now, Hamdan Sabahi, the nationalist leader that many people like, he has no chance. He has no money to run for president. If General Sisi has hundreds of millions of dollars that not only come from, Egyptian billionaires like Naguib Sawiris, but also from Saudi Arabia, from United Arab Emirates, from Kuwait, who wanted to see General Sisi to be in power. I'm not saying that as a secret. This is a well-known, assertions and allegations or facts on the ground. And General Sisi said if he was elected, the first country we'll visit will be Saudi Arabia. Now, you see now how things are going. A military man is returning to Egypt to rule Egypt once again. I don't think General Sisi will be the best choice, but that's, up to the Egyptian people. It's not up to me. I'm not an Egyptian, citizen. If the people chose him, let it be. Let's see in 4 years what will he do. And if he doesn't, if he re-elected again, or change the constitution, or imprison more people, or kill more people, or free all people, that's the Egyptian people will have the benefit, from democracy, or they will be stuck with another military man who will kill them more or imprison them more. That's too early to see, but you could see where things are going based on his history and the history of the Egyptian political scene in the past, 3 years.
All right, we will revisit this important theme of the Egyptian presidential elections and all the controversies and debates around them right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Ziyad brand. Quality products from our family to yours. Ziyad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Dana, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziyad.com. That's www.ziyad.com. Ziyad, quality products from our family to yours.
If you get into a car accident, how will you pick up the pieces? You can't work. When the bills pile up, who will help you? Call 866-YOUR-RIGHTS.
I called Jumana. She took care of everything. My medical bill, lost wages, and even a large settlement.
I am Jumana Kirouz, and I assure you that my team will not stop until you get the most for your rights.
If you've been in a car accident, call Jumana. 866-YOUR-RIGHTS.
المحامي ستيفن لجانا المحامي القدير في الهجرة والتجنس يعلن افتتاحه لمكتبه الواقع في مدينة ديربون وتماما على 5300 شيفر رود. المحامي لجانا لديه خبرة طويلة في قضايا الهجرة والتجنس، قضايا الترحيل، يتعامل أيضا مع قضايا اللجوء من داخل وخارج الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية وأيضا جميع أنواع الفيز. المحامي لجانا لديه مكاتب منتشرة في العديد من الولايات الأمريكية، بوسطن، نيويورك، واشنطن وميشيغان. لجميع استفساراتكم القانونية اتصلوا بالمحامي لجانا على الرقم 313-945-0022 313-945-0022. جميع الاستشارات مجانية لمستمعي صباح الخير ميشيغان.
This is Dr. Sahar Kamiz. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arab, WNDK 690 AM, and WZMZ 700 AM. Welcome back, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Kamiz. We're discussing this morning a very important and timely topic, the controversial upcoming Egyptian presidential elections. And with me this morning to discuss this topic are two renowned experts in the field of media and political analysis, Mr. Ali Younes and Dr. Atif Abdelgawad. Mr. Ali Younes is a journalist, writer, and political analyst of the Middle East, based in Washington, D.C. He's a member of the Washington Association of Arab Journalists and the National Arab American Journalists Association, and is listed as one of the U.S. State Department's Middle East analysts and experts. In addition, he's a contributor to several Arabic and English and foreign radio stations and television stations and newspapers. Dr. Atif Abdelgawad is a long-time Washington-based Middle East broadcast journalist and newspaper columnist. He's a host of numerous shows on Middle Eastern TV networks, and he now covers Washington for Egypt Channel 1 as well as its satellite network. Welcome back to the show, and my question is to you, Mr. Ali Younes. about the U.S. foreign policy. I cannot avoid asking you this question because of your expertise, being a political analyst and expert who is listed with the U.S. Department of State. I want to know what is your own take on the possible or potential role, if any, that the U.S. can play in terms of what is going on now in the Egyptian political scene, and what side, if any, should it take?
Well, I think in principle, the U.S. wants to see a stable Egypt, some sort of a democracy that it will not cause many problems in the future. That said, what I mean by that is, the United States is interested to see a democracy in Egypt. Why democracy is important for the Americans? Because democracy will stabilize the people, and when you have a democratic country, it will not engage in wars, it will not engage in reckless behavior, because it will be accountable before its people, and will be more interested in providing health care, jobs, better life for its citizens instead of being adventurous. And you see, when you have dictatorships that engage in war. Iraq invaded, Kuwait under Saddam Hussein. You have many wars on unstable. Sometimes dictators are stable, but they will enrage their people because they will not provide good life for their own citizens. At least they don't try to. So the U.S. government is interested to have a new regime in Egypt that will take care of the Egyptian economy and satisfy the Egyptian people so they could have a stable relations with the United States. Egypt is important to the United States because, for one, it borders Israel and it has a peace treaty with Israel, and the United States pays $1.5 billion a year to have Egypt stay in peace with Israel in a formal peace treaty. The second thing is, United States supports the Egyptian army. The Egyptian army is 99% supported by U.S. weapons, training, and intelligence. And without it, the Egyptian army cannot fight a war. Because if you are depending on American weapons and American training and American military doctrines, you cannot engage in a war against an American enemy. You have to engage in a war that with the U.S. approval because, for example, if the Egyptian army, fights Israel, it can only fight for 2 weeks because U.S. will not support spare parts. It will not support intelligence. It will not give them weapons. It will not allow them to even fight a war against Israel because under the conditions of the sales of U.S. weapons, Egyptian army cannot fight against American allies. I use that as an example why Egypt is important to the U.S. The other thing is, the United States also wants to see a successful example in the Arab world that will ensure stability. It will ensure that the Arab people, have discontent. Today, in the past, as you mentioned, in 1950s or 60s and 70s, if I want to become a president of a country in a coup, all I have to do is go to the radio station and TV station and take it over and become the president and have communique number one. Now, all you have to do is have Facebook pages. You'll be on Twitter. You'll be on social media. You'll be all over the world. So the Arab governments cannot have control over their people anymore. U.S. realizes that. I want to advise the new Egyptian government and the current Egyptian government that they have to take care of their people and they have to have some sort of democracy. It doesn't have to be a perfect democracy, but you cannot rule as if you still live under Gamal Abdel Nasser. This message is for Sisi. You have to be accountable to the people. You have to take care of the Egyptian economy. You have to have economic reform. That's why I think U.S. can play a role and pressure the Egyptian government that you cannot have civil rights abuses. You can't have abuse of the Egyptian people, human rights. You can't abuse Christian minorities. You can't abuse Muslim majority. You can't abuse, Baha'is or women or children. So the U.S. can play a crucial role if the President Barack Obama administration wants to play that role instead of just staying on the side and let the Egyptians do whatever they want.
it seems to me that sometimes the American administration's role is, damned if it does and damned if it doesn't. If it does take a part, it gets, kind of accused of interference in another country's internal affairs and sovereignty. And if it does not take a part, then it is seen as being passive and not really wanting to weigh in and exert its own pressure. In just, a couple of sentences, because I want to touch with you also quickly on the role of media as you, perceive it. What would the American administration really do in this situation? How could it possibly exert pressure, as you mentioned, in affecting the internal situation in Egypt now, if any?
Well, I think, with Dr. Sahar, I think the problem is the Obama administration that came after George Bush administration that's not really interested in the Middle East. The Obama administration want to disengage from Iraq, want to disengage from Afghanistan, want to disengage from the Middle East, because the Obama political philosophy of this administration is that enough is enough of 8 years of George Bush and before that of Bill Clinton, that we supported coups, we supported militaries, we supported dictatorships that tarnished the image of the United States in the Arab world as a country that can do for good. So with this lack of engagement, strong engagement, and we see that in Syria, you see the Egyptians or the Saudis or the Arab people lost faith in America as that can really pressure the Arab governments to be a force for good. And it will not even pressure them to stop being a force for evil. It will not, as we see in Syria, many people are disappointed that U.S. is not intervening outside the Syrian people. Some people are happy. They don't want the U.S. to intervene, both sides of the coin. But like you said, it's damn if you do, damn if it doesn't. But it has to do with the Obama administration that are not interested in the Middle East anymore. The U.S. should care about its, foreign policy toward the East, China, economic threats in Russia and in Europe. The Middle East is still under U.S. control economically with the flow of oil, but, it has a lot of upheavals, and the Obama administration is not interested to be fully engaged the way George Bush was and in the past.
And, also because you're a media expert and analyst and you've been, really on many different national and international TV stations and newspapers, I wanted to know also your opinion and your take on the Egyptian media scene now, which has been, in my view, and you might agree or disagree with me, both reflecting and contributing to the highly polarized and divided political scene that we are witnessing in Egypt today. What is your take on this issue?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked me this question. It's very dear to me. First, I'm the editor of the Arab Daily News. It's www.thearabdailynews. I write, every day on it, on the media and the Middle East, Arab Americans as well. I have no faith in the Arab media in general. Okay, let me put it out there. Egyptian media, in my opinion, and I might sound harsh, and I apologize for that, is a joke. Okay, because that's yellow journalism. It's not real journalism. It's they advocate, one line. I support the military, or I support the Muslim Brotherhood, or I support this, or support that. Media should be the stepping stone toward democracy. Free press is important for democracy. We don't have free press in the Arab world. Okay, in Egypt, it's even worse. I watch clips of owner of Egyptian satellite channels kicking the guests on air. Humiliating journalists on air, or journalists who are on payroll of governments. They have no ethics. They have no, morals as far as a journalist should always speak the truth. The journalist should always put the truth ahead of the government, before the government, and should never get paid by the government. The government has its own people. So, in my opinion, I don't have a strong opinion or positive opinion of Arab journalists in general. There are exceptions, of course. But Egyptian journalism, I think it's yellow journalism. I think it has a long way to go because they are, dehumanize the Muslim Brotherhood. That's not journalism. You should tell both sides of the story, the Brotherhood or whoever, and the other side, both the pro and the cons, opposing views. You should have equal time. But what you see is media sponsored by groups who are interested in having one line, one political line, a military or a brotherhood or Christians or Muslims. You can't have a democracy, You can't have free society, a free press, when you have media who are excluding the others or dehumanizing the others or insulting the others. You know, that's not a service to the society. That's not a service to the country. You know, and, you know, I'm sorry to say, but, you know, that's my opinion on these things. And, you know, having grown up here and practiced media for the last 20 years in the United States, I look at these media, and I'm not saying just the Egyptian journalism. I don't watch Al Jazeera. I don't watch Al Arabi. I don't watch none of that, okay? Because, you know, as Ali Yunus, you know, it's insulting to see journalists practice this kind of journalism that is not a service to the well-being of the citizens in the Arab world, Egyptians, Saudi, Iraqis, Libyans, Jordanians, whatever. You know, a journalist is the conscience of the people. He should speak the truth. He should support the people that he speaks for them and trust him or her to tell them the truth and watch the government. You know, I don't see that happening in Egypt or in the Arab world. That's my take, Dr. Sahar, and I apologize if I sounded too harsh.
Thank you, and we will revisit this important theme of the media's role right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Betsy's Bridal and Formal, Michigan's largest selection of special occasion dresses. Exclusive bridal and cocktail fashions for formal engagements, proms, showers, pageants, mother of the bride and groom, and full bridal wear. Sizes 6 through 30. Betsy's has over 33 years in the bridal business. We promise you the best quality service and alterations. Betsy's Bridal and Formal is located at 6189 Haggerty Road in West Bloomfield. Call 248-669-9999. That's 248-669-9999.
New Concept Product and Design، رائدة إعداد وتجهيز المطاعم والمطابخ بالمعدات بشكل كامل. غرف التبريد والثلاجات، يمكننا مساعدتكم في الحصول على التمويل اللازم لمشروعكم، وكذا الحصول على الإجازات اللازمة من الدوائر الصحية. نخدمكم بخبرة 25 عاما. ناجي عبود صديقكم الدائم. للاتصال الهاتف رقم 248-442-9292 248-442-9292 وتماما على 33900 West 8 Mile Farmington Hills. للمزيد من التفاصيل زيارة الموقع الإلكتروني www.nuconceptproducts.com.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arab, WNZK 690 AM and WZMZ 700 AM.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, discussing this morning an important and timely topic, the Egyptian presidential elections, their challenges, the implications, and the prospects. And with me this morning discussing this important topic are two renowned media experts, Mr. Ali Yunus and Dr. Atif Abdigawad. Dr. Abdigawad, you have been a long-time Washington-based Middle East broadcast journalist and newspaper columnist and a renowned media expert. And before going to the commercial break, we were talking about the role of the media in creating the highly divided and polarized scenes that we are witnessing today in Egypt. And Mr. Ali Yunus voiced his opinions about the what he calls the yellow journalism in the Egyptian media, and the fact that many of them are quote-unquote now acting like a joke. They're not really taking their job as professionally, as seriously as they should, and not really reflecting or presenting a balanced, objective, professional view of what is going on. What is your take on this issue?
Well, of course, I agree, totally agree. The problem with the Arab media, Egyptian media as well, is that it's either a state media controlled by the government, or even when you have privately owned stations, these are inclined to be going along the prevailing line. Like, for example, this is Well, I think it's cultural also. We, in Egypt and the Arabic-speaking world, we tend to make little gods out of our rulers. In Saudi Arabia, the king is not just a king, is not just a ruler. He's also a father, a big brother. And in Egypt, the same thing. A great deal of the problem goes back to the deterioration of education in Arab countries. It's also the widespread of television satellite channels that each one of them has an agenda, whether be it religious, political, partisan, social, personal, commercial. Each one of them has an agenda. And then, of course, there is an alarming trend now in the Arab world, and that is a lot of those satellite channels are also funded or financed by intelligent services that run the agenda behind the scenes. And then finally, I may point out that part of the problem also goes to the kind of media people who appear on television, who control the microphones, who write in newspapers. These, they believe that they are on the air not for the public interest, but just to promote their own egos.
Mm-hmm. These are very, very important points, and they're very relevant also to the kind of role that the media is now playing in terms of preparing people for the upcoming presidential elections. It is no secret that some people, as I said earlier, are very skeptical about this particular round of presidential elections. They're looking at it with skepticism, they're looking at it with sometimes pessimism, or depending on what side you are on, they might be optimistic and looking forward. But in general, there is this feeling that the media have been mobilizing people. There is this kind of theme of mass mobilization or mobilizing people in a certain direction or another. Would you like to comment on this particular role that the media may be playing in this situation?
Yes, of course. It's the whole scenario of the current election it's a sort of choreographed. It's carefully planned. It's a referendum, but taking the appearance of a real competition with two candidates, and we know, of course, who the front runner is. But the media, of course, follows one line, simply because the other part, another big chunk of the Egyptian society, right now are behind bars, and I mean the Muslim Brotherhood and also their supporters. So what you have here is a group of people who are supporters of one point of view, political point of view, and the other point of view is absent. Now, I'm not saying that the Muslim Brotherhood were successful, would have taken Egypt to the right kind of future. But I'm also not saying that General Sisi should put all those people behind bars forever and ever. And a great number of those people may not have committed any crimes, may not have violated any laws, may have just expressed their opinion by organizing protests or taking to the streets. But the role of the media is critical here. The problem is that we have only one point of view, and everybody is rushing to show himself or herself better supporting the current regime in a better way. So we don't have a real debate. We have a highly polarized society. And we have a great deal of hypocrisy, and we have a great deal, I would say, lack of professionalism.
And I particularly like the phrase you used, like about making gods out of our own rulers. I used a similar phrase, which is making pharaohs. We know how to create the pharaoh with using our, media system, propaganda tools. All of that creates this image of the, the infallible, a leader who can be like a god or a pharaoh that nobody can touch or nobody can question. And going back to the theme of accountability that Mr. Ali Yunus touched upon more than once. How can we possibly alter this whole notion of creating gods or creating pharaohs out of our leaders and trying to balance this with a much more professional, objective, and balanced type of media coverage? What could be done about this?
It's going to take a long time. It's cultural. I think it's part of our society being patriarchal. As you know, we always adored our the father, the big boss of the family, the tribe. He is the leader of the tribe. He is the leader of the family. He is the big father, the old father, the wise man. And it's not going to go away. People transfer that cultural aspect to their political choices as well. And so I don't think it's going to go away immediately. It's going to take time. Now, the Egyptians for 7,000 years never really revolted against their ruler, their pharaohs. They revolted against foreign invaders, occupation armies, and so forth, but they really never revolted or attempted effectively to criticize the ruler until we witnessed the uprising of January 2011, which toppled President Hosni Mubarak. And at that point in time, I was stunned. I was surprised that the Egyptians finally, after 7,000 years, are revolting against the big father of the family. As you remember, President Sadat of Egypt used to refer to himself as the father of the family. So this is cultural, and I don't expect it to go away, but at least I would have expected the media to lead the way, to lead society to the right direction.
And speaking of the right direction, I mean, what direction is the country really going to right now? I mean, this is a big question. I know there's a lot of influx, there's a lot of transition, there's a lot of uncertainty in the whole scene, which, as I said earlier, makes people skeptical about this particular round of presidential elections for many, many reasons. But as an Egyptian yourself, I would like to, have your own view on this particular notion. How do you see this whole political scene right now in general, and this upcoming controversial presidential election in particular? What light do you see it in, and what is your own take on it?
Well, I would like to make two simple points. Point number one is that there is no doubt that Egypt has taken a U-turn away from the uprising, the objectives of the January 2011 uprising, which toppled President Hosni Mubarak. They are definitely turning away from that uprising. That uprising never really occurred. It did occur, of course, but on the ground, it's no longer there. And as you remember, the people who took to the streets to topple Hosni Mubarak at that time, they had three demands: bread, freedom, and social justice. And implicit in that, on those demands, the Egyptians demanded an end and effectively put an end to the domination of the military armed forces in politics. Now, that is not happening today. We have an extension of military domination as represented by General Sisi's taking or running for president. But the second point is that really it looks like General Sisi, with the consent of the majority of the Egyptians, are opting now for stability and security at the expense of freedom, at the expense of democracy. General Sisi himself, in one of his recent interviews, made it clear. He simply said, don't expect real democracy in Egypt before 20 to 25 years. So here we go. And the Egyptians seem to be happy with that. Maybe because the past 3 years they have been in turmoil, and it looks like they are longing for some sort of stability, security, safety on the streets, and so therefore they are themselves going along with the prescription provided by their front-runner candidate, and that is security, safety, stability at the expense of democracy.
Okay, we will revisit this very important topic and this important theme right after this commercial break. Stay tuned, please.
Dr. Al-Zuhaili specializes in diabetes and endocrinology and has been conducting research for over 12 years. Right now, there are several clinical studies actively enrolling for both adult and pediatric patients with type 2 diabetes. Under Dr. Al-Zuhaili's care, participants in the clinical research trials receive free lab work, medical procedures, medical supplies, and medications to assist in their treatment. Qualified participants are also compensated for their time and travel in addition to receiving top care for their diabetes treatment and control. The research department is equipped with experienced and friendly staff who will work to manage patient care and schedule accommodations. Please contact Al-Zuhaili Medical Consultants at 1331 Monroe Street in Dearborn. Visit alzuhailidiabetes.com and call 313-581-8903. 313-581-8903.
مؤسسة الحياة للإغاثة والتنمية في مدينة ساوثفيلد في ولاية ميشيغان، المؤسسة الرائدة في العمل الإغاثي والإنساني. مؤسسة الحياة ومنذ 20 سنة تقدم العون للفقراء والمحتاجين والمتضررين بسبب الكوارث الطبيعية أو الحروب في شتى أنحاء العالم. كما تقوم مؤسسة الحياة بكفالة الأيتام والعوائل الفقيرة وحفر آبار المياه في مناطق الحاجة، وأيضا تقوم مؤسسة الحياة بتزويد المشافي والمستوصفات الصحية بالأدوية والمعدات الطبية وإنشاء مدارس وعيادات طبية في أقطار عديدة من العالم. مؤسسة الحياة مرخصة للعمل في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية، وجميع التبرعات معفاة من الضرائب. اتصلوا بمؤسسة الحياة للإغاثة والتنمية على رقم الهاتف المجاني 1-800-827-3543 أو زوروا موقعهم الإلكتروني على www.lifeusa.org.
This is Dr. Sahar Khamis. Join me on the third Friday of each month at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll be discussing some of the most important current political, economic, and social issues in my program, The Bridge. On Radio Baladi, on America's Voice of the Arab, WNDK 690 AM and WZMZ 700 AM.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. This is your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Maryland and an expert on Arab and Muslim media, discussing this morning an important topic, the upcoming Egyptian presidential elections, challenges, prospects, and implications. And with me this morning to discuss this important topic are two renowned media experts, Mr. Ali Yunus and Dr. Atif Abdelgawad. Dr. Abdelgawad, before going to the break, we were talking about the Egyptian polarized political scene. And I want to ask you specifically about some of the equally polarized attitudes towards it. There are those who are trying to rally people, literally, to go out and vote and elect. You know, I've been receiving text messages from people saying, you have to go out, you have to elect, you have to vote. And then there are those who are going to the other extreme, which is completely boycotting the elections. In fact, a group called the Egyptian American Alliance for Human Rights is actually organizing a boycott protest. in front of the Egyptian embassy here in Washington, D.C. This coming Sunday, and they're trying to tell people to boycott the elections completely. What is your take on these two different bipolar positions?
You know, I have my own personal view, and I, as an Egyptian voter, I have made up my mind how I want to participate or not participate. But the question is, obviously, you have two candidates, and as I said earlier, it is an election, but as a matter of fact, it's a referendum. And because it looks like the choices are impossible between the two candidates. One of them, the general, as I said, represents an extension of the status quo, an extension of the military domination in Egyptian politics that started in 1952 with the coup led by Gamal Abdel Nasser at the time. It continued, the domination continued through President Sadat, President Hosni Mubarak. And now we have General Sisi, who is bound to win the election. Then we have the other choice, the impossible choice, is also represented by Hamdin Sabahi, the other candidate, who represent Nasserism, who represent Gamal Abdel Nasser's policies that history has made a judgment, clear-cut judgment on Nasser's policies, whether domestic or foreign affairs policies. It's been a failure. It's part of the reason why Egypt is in a state on affairs that we have right now. So, you know, from the defeat of 1967 to the Yemen war, to socialism, to nationalization, to economic disasters, we have it all, and it goes back to the policies that are promoted by one of the two candidates today, Hamdin Sabahi. So that's how I am explaining the impossible choice. So there is no wonder that some Egyptians now are boycotting the current election simply or partly because of that impossible choice, because of the apparent lack of democracy. And let me just add one final point. Excuse me. What we have here is we have a presidential election that will be followed later on with elections for the parliament. In other words, you will have an unelected government passing laws to organize election for the parliament. It's not the other way around. We should have a parliament passing laws to elect a government. But that's not happening. And the reason for that, obviously, is clear. We have a government, we have a president, and then we have an election for a parliament. In other words, the government, the non-elected government, will be on control of how parliament will be selected.
Mm-hmm. You are an Egyptian living in the diaspora, and I'm also an Egyptian living in the diaspora. And that makes me ask the question, what role do you think Egyptians living in the diaspora outside of their own home country should play? What role can they play, and what can they possibly do in order to contribute to altering or improving the situation in the country, and hopefully maybe bringing it back to the middle ground of reconciliation and national dialogue?
We have very little role to play, not because we are reluctant to play a role, but there are factors that are restricting our ability to contribute. One factor is we are away, and we are not in Egypt there. So the perception of a lot of Egyptians is that we have run away from the challenges. And the other perception is that we know little about Egyptian problems simply because we elected to be away to pursue our material luxury, comfort, and we are not in Egypt. So we know nothing about Egyptian problems and challenges. And then there is also...
Which is not necessarily true, of course.
Yeah, but no, nothing of that is true. Nothing of that is true. I'm telling you about the perceptions that are obstructing our ability to contribute. And of course, there is another group of Egyptians who will tell you, oh, you live in America? Oh, you are a CIA agent. Now, I'm not saying that's widespread, but you come across it. People, in fact, some of the so-called revolutionary personalities were hosted here after the 2011 uprising. The Egyptian-American community invited them over here, and we had a conference, and we listened to them, and we even helped them go shopping. We paid for their air tickets, for their hotels and everything. We honored them. And finally, when one of them went back to Egypt, she published an article in which she described Egyptians in America as being agents of the CIA. So, for goodness sake, what am I supposed to do when I'm trying to contribute to a new Egypt, and you're faced with people who will accuse you of all kinds of accusations?
Mm-hmm. All right, so you're not very optimistic when it comes to the role that the Egyptians in the diaspora can play. I'm wondering if you are optimistic about the role that social media can play, because Mr. Ali Yunus and yourself, you've been talking about the controlled Egyptian mainstream media, which is not very professional and not contributing to a healthy political debate. In just a few sentences, because we are approaching the end of our program, how do you perceive the role of social media, Facebook, Twitter, blogs, YouTube? How can they possibly play a role in terms of filling some of these gaps, or maybe even creating a better balance?
Great role. I think social media plays and will play a great role. As we remember or know that the uprising against President Hosni Mubarak was initially organized through social media, and it flourished. But of course, the drawback to this is that authorities, governments all over the world now, they are well aware of that effective tool, and they have the ability to block it. We have seen that in Turkey, when Twitter was blocked in Turkey. In fact, YouTube was also blocked. And of course, you have to go through legal battles to get that blocking lifted. As you know, in Egypt, it's still social media is available, but you can never predict what might happen in future if young people in Egypt attempted to use it as a tool again. There is a law in Egypt banning demonstrations. So blocking social media in Egypt cannot be ruled out if the authorities perceive it as a real threat in the future. But briefly, social media is a great, effective tool and will remain so even if authorities attempt to block it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So I'm afraid we are approaching the end of our show for this morning. This has been your host, Dr. Sahar Khamis, professor in the Department of Communication at the University of Maryland and an expert on Arab and Muslim media. And with me this morning was two renowned media experts and analysts, Mr. Ali Yunus and Dr. Atif Abdelgawad, discussing a very important and timely topic, the upcoming Egyptian presidential elections, challenges, prospects, and implications. Let's hope for a better outcome for Egypt, a better future, returning back to the middle balanced ground of reconciliation, national dialogue for a better future and a better country that will really exemplify stability, social cohesion, social welfare, and political stability for everyone. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to the show this morning, and I hope to be with you again soon next month. Thank you so much. Have a good day.